Brianna, why am I seeing wedding photos online when you told me the ceremony was still coming? Because we got married yesterday. We only invited real family. Real family?
I had paid my son's rent, car bills, and groceries for 4 years. But when I asked about his wedding, my daughter-in-law smiled and said, "We got married yesterday. We only invited real family." 1 week later, when their rent was due, she called me crying. So I gave her the same answer. Sorry, I only help real family. I stood in my kitchen with the phone still pressed against my ear, even after Brianna had stopped speaking. For a few seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. Maybe she had said they had planned the wedding yesterday. Maybe she meant they had signed some papers and the real ceremony was still coming. Maybe my 68-year-old ears had twisted her words into something crueler than they were. But then Brianna laughed softly, not nervously, not apologetically, proudly. "We didn't want a big scene, Margaret," she said. "It was intimate, elegant. Only the people who truly mattered." My name is Margaret Collins, a 68-year-old widow living in Savannah, Georgia. I had spent most of my life believing that if you loved your family hard enough, sacrificed enough, and stayed quiet enough, they would eventually understand your heart. That belief died in my kitchen. My son, Ethan Collins, was 36, tall like his late father, with tired blue eyes and the kind of gentle voice that used to make people trust him instantly. As a boy, he had been tender and shy, always hiding behind my skirt when strangers came near. But adulthood had turned that softness into something weaker. He avoided difficult conversations the way some men avoid unpaid bills. And now, on the other end of the phone, he was avoiding me. "Ethan?" I asked. "Is this true?" There was a pause. Then he cleared his throat. "Mom, it just happened fast." Fast. I looked down at the cream-colored dress hanging over the back of my kitchen chair. I had bought it 2 weeks earlier from a small boutique downtown. It had pearl buttons, lace sleeves, and a matching shawl. I had imagined wearing it while standing proudly beside my only son, maybe wiping away tears as he kissed his bride. Now it looked foolish, like a costume for a role I had never been invited to play. Brianna Whitaker, now Brianna Collins, was 29, polished, pretty, and sharp in the way expensive glass is sharp. She had honey blonde hair, perfect white teeth, and a smile that always appeared a second before she asked for something. For 4 years, I had mistaken that smile for warmth. I had paid their rent when Ethan said work was slow. I had covered their car payment when Brianna said they were just 1 month behind. I had filled their refrigerator, bought their sofa, replaced their broken washing machine, and given Brianna $800 toward the wedding dress she wore without me there. "Where was it?" I asked. Another silence. Brianna answered instead. "Charleston, at the Seabrook Palms Resort. It was beautiful. Beautiful." I stared at the envelope on my counter. Inside was $1,000 in cash, folded neatly inside a wedding card that said, "For your new beginning." I almost laughed. Their new beginning had started by erasing me. After the call ended, I sat alone at the kitchen table. Outside, the Savannah afternoon glowed golden through the curtains, warm and peaceful, as if the world had not just split open beneath my feet. Then my phone buzzed, a Facebook notification. It was from Caroline Whitaker, Brianna's cousin, a cheerful young woman I had met only once at Thanksgiving. Her profile photo showed her holding a glass of champagne, grinning beside a beach sunset. She had posted an album. Brianna and Ethan's Magical Charleston Wedding. My hands trembled as I opened it. There they were. Ethan in a navy suit. Brianna in a flowing white dress. Her parents standing proudly beside them, her brothers raising champagne glasses. friends laughing under strings of lights, dozens of smiling faces. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked included. And in photo after photo, I saw the truth more clearly than Brianna had ever said it. They had not forgotten me. They had chosen to leave me out. I zoomed in on one picture of Ethan smiling beside Brianna's father, a broad-shouldered man named Richard Whitaker, who owned 2 car dealerships and always spoke as if money made him taller than other men. Richard had his hand on Ethan's shoulder, in the place where a mother should have stood. That was when my grief turned into something colder. I closed the album, placed the untouched wedding card in a drawer, and looked at the dress one last time. For 4 years, I had paid to be treated like family. But on the day it mattered most, they showed me exactly what I was. Not a mother, not a guest, not real family. Just a wallet with a heartbeat. A week passed after the wedding album appeared on Facebook, but my kitchen still felt like the place where something inside me had been buried. I moved the cream-colored dress from the chair to the closet, then from the closet to a donation bag, but I never had the courage to take it out of the house. The wedding card with the $1,000 stayed hidden in the drawer beside old batteries and rubber bands. Every morning, I told myself I was fine. Every night, I replayed Brianna's voice saying, "Only real family." On the 7th day, just after lunch, my phone rang. Brianna's name lit up the screen. For one foolish second, I thought maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe Ethan had finally told her how deeply they had hurt me. But when I answered, her voice came out soft and sweet, the same syrupy tone she used whenever trouble had a $sign attached to it. "Margaret, thank God you answered. The rent is late. Mr. Callahan said if we don't pay by Friday, he's starting eviction papers. Did you forget to make the transfer?" I looked at the calendar on my wall. The first of the month was circled in blue, just like always. For 4 years, that circle had meant Ethan and Brianna's rent. Not my doctor's appointment, not lunch with a friend, not something for myself. Their rent. My hand tightened around the phone, but my voice stayed calm. "No, Brianna," I said. "I didn't forget." She paused. "Then, is there a problem with the bank?" "No," I said. "There is a problem with being treated like an outsider until the bills arrive." She laughed once, awkward and sharp. "Margaret, don't start this again. The wedding was complicated. We can talk about your feelings later, but right now, we need help." That sentence did something to me. Your feelings later. As if my pain were an errand she could postpone. For the first time in my life, I did not soften my words to make someone else comfortable. I did not apologize. I did not explain myself into a corner. I simply said, "I'm sorry, Brianna. I only help real family." The silence on the other end was so complete, I could hear the refrigerator humming beside me. Then she whispered, "That's cruel." I almost smiled through the ache in my chest. "No," I said. "Cruel was letting me pay for a wedding dress I was never invited to see." I hung up before she could cry. 10 minutes later, Ethan's messages began arriving. "Mom, this is childish." Then, "You're punishing us over one mistake." Then, "We have responsibilities because we counted on you." I read every word, and for once, I did not respond. Instead, I pulled out a yellow legal pad, my bank statements, old receipts, and the small notebook where I had tracked family help, as if it were something noble. By sunset, the numbers stared back at me like a confession. Rent, car payments, insurance, groceries, credit card debt, birthdays, Christmas, repairs, wedding expenses. More than $48,000 in 4 years. Then I found 3 canceled travel brochures tucked between the papers. New Orleans, French Quarter, Garden District, jazz cruise on the Mississippi. 3 times I had planned that trip. 3 times I canceled because Ethan and Brianna had an emergency. I touched the brochure and finally understood. I had not just given them my money, I had given them pieces of the life I was supposed to live. The next morning, I woke before sunrise with Ethan's last message still glowing in my mind. We counted on you. Not, I'm sorry, Mom. Not, are you okay? Just a reminder that my purpose, in his eyes, was to keep paying. I made coffee, dressed in a navy blouse I usually saved for church, and gathered every bank statement into a folder. Then I drove to Savannah First Trust, the small brick bank on Abercorn Street where I had kept my account since my husband was alive. The lobby smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and floor polish. Behind the counter stood Mrs. Joanne Harper, a woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked brown hair, careful eyes, and the calm patience of someone who had spent decades listening to people whisper about money problems. She recognized me immediately. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins," she said. "Are we making the usual transfer to Ethan today?" The word usual hit harder than I expected. Even the bank knew my sacrifice had become routine. "No," I said, placing my folder on the counter. "I need to cancel every automatic transfer connected to Ethan Collins or Brianna Collins. Rent, car payment, insurance, anything scheduled from my account." Mrs. Harper's hand paused above her keyboard. She did not look shocked, exactly. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for this day. "Of course," she said gently. "Would you like to step into my office?" That small kindness nearly broke me. Inside her office, Mrs. Harper closed the door and began pulling up my records. While she worked, I watched her expression change from professional focus to quiet concern. One transfer after another appeared on the screen. $500 here, $700 there, $1,000 for emergency repairs, $1,200 marked temporary help. She did not judge me, but her silence had weight. Finally, she asked, "Margaret, are you sure you want to remove all of them?" I nodded. "Yes, and I want to block any outside access to my account." She turned from the monitor and looked at me with unexpected tenderness. "Then we'll update your passwords, remove shared security questions, and add a verbal passcode. No one will be able to call pretending to act for you." Then she hesitated. "Margaret, forgive me if this is too personal, but I've been worried about you for a long time." My throat tightened. "You have?" She nodded. "I've watched these withdrawals for years. You always look tired afterward. I wondered whether anyone was looking after you." For a moment, I could not speak. My own son had not noticed the weight he put on me, but this bank teller had. Mrs. Harper opened a drawer and handed me a small flyer. "There's a community meeting Thursday evening at St. Luke's Fellowship Hall. It's for widows, retirees, and seniors dealing with financial pressure from family. No one forces you to speak. You can just listen." I stared at the flyer as if she had handed me a map out of a burning house. When I walked out of Savannah First Trust, the afternoon sun felt almost too bright. Nothing about the street had changed. The same traffic, the same oak trees, the same people moving through their ordinary lives. But something in me had shifted. The pain was still there, deep and raw. But beneath it was relief. For the first time in years, no invisible hand was reaching into my account. No one else's emergency was waiting to swallow my peace. My money was mine again, and so was the woman who had earned it. That evening, I came home from the bank with Mrs. Harper's flyer folded inside my purse, like a secret promise. I had planned to make tea, heat up leftover chicken soup, and sit quietly at my kitchen table without thinking about Ethan or Brianna for 1 full hour. But the moment I opened my front door, I knew something was wrong. The hallway light was on. I never left it on. Then I heard voices coming from my dining room. I stepped forward slowly and saw them sitting inside my house as if they belonged there. Ethan was at the table, rubbing his forehead like a man under great stress. Brianna stood by the window in a black coat, her eyes red but strangely dry. Beside them was a stranger in a charcoal suit. He was in his late 50s, thin, pale, with slick gray hair and a leather briefcase placed beside my chair. Ethan looked up first. "Mom, thank God. We were worried." I stared at him. Worried people knock. The stranger rose and offered his hand. "Mrs. Collins, I'm Calvin Price, an attorney specializing in family planning and elder care." His smile was smooth, practiced, and completely empty. I did not shake his hand. My eyes had already moved to the papers spread across my dining table. Bank statements, an old insurance folder, a copy of my late husband's will. Private documents I kept in the small desk drawer near the hallway. Documents they had no right to touch. "How did you get in?" I asked, though I already knew. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "You gave me a spare key years ago." "For emergencies," I said. "Not for breaking into my house and digging through my life." Brianna made a soft, choking sound, then covered her mouth as if holding back tears. She was pretty even when pretending to be broken. "Margaret, please don't say it like that. We're scared for you. You've changed so suddenly." Ethan leaned forward, using the gentle voice he used when he wanted to sound like a good son. "Canceling the transfers, locking us out of the account, ignoring my messages. That's not like you, Mom. Brianna and I think the loneliness may be affecting your judgment." The word loneliness landed exactly where he aimed it. I was lonely. I had been lonely for years. But loneliness had not made me foolish. Love had. Mr. Price opened his briefcase and slid a folder toward me. "Mrs. Collins, no one is accusing you of anything. Your son simply wants to help. This document would give Ethan temporary financial authority, just until things stabilize." I looked down at the title. Durable Power of Attorney. My stomach turned cold. "Temporary," he said. But the language beneath it was not temporary at all. It gave Ethan access to accounts, property decisions, insurance claims, and legal signatures. Then I saw something that made my hands stop trembling. On the copy of my husband's will, someone had written in red ink, Brianna's handwriting, neat, sharp, unmistakable. She had circled the house, circled the savings account, underlined the phrase sole surviving beneficiary, and written beside it, future asset? As if I were already gone. As if my home, my savings, and Robert's last gift to me were items on her shopping list. I picked up the power of attorney papers. Ethan exhaled, thinking I had surrendered. Brianna stepped closer, her fake tears suddenly hopeful. "That's the right thing, Margaret," she whispered. "Let us take care of you." I walked past them into the hallway, opened the closet, and pulled out the small paper shredder I used for old bills. I plugged it in beside the dining table. Then, without saying another word, I fed the first page into the machine. The shredder screamed louder than Brianna. "Mom!" Ethan shouted, standing up. I fed in the second page, then the third. Mr. Price's polished face finally cracked. "Mrs. Collins, I strongly advise you to stop." I looked him straight in the eye. "And I strongly advise you to leave my house before I call the police." Brianna's mouth twisted, no longer sweet, no longer tearful. For 1 second, I saw the woman behind the performance. When the last page disappeared into strips, I gathered my will, my bank papers, and my insurance file against my chest. "This is my house," I said. "My money, my life, and none of you are allowed to manage it." For the first time, Ethan did not look worried. He looked angry. After Ethan, Brianna, and Calvin Price left my house, I stood in the dining room, surrounded by strips of shredded paper and a silence that felt almost violent. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear anymore, from anger. I walked to the front door, slid the chain lock into place, and stared at the spare key hook near the hallway. Ethan's key was missing, of course. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house sounded like a warning. By morning, I called a locksmith and a security company. The locksmith, Raymond Carter, was a broad, quiet man in his 40s with tattooed arms and gentle manners. He changed every lock on my house without asking too many questions, though his eyes softened when I told him my son had used a spare key without permission. Later, a young technician installed 2 cameras, one facing the porch, one facing the driveway. Watching the little red lights blink on gave me more comfort than I expected. Just after the technician left, there was a careful knock at my door. Through the new camera, I saw Linda Mae Thompson, my next-door neighbor. She was a retired nurse in her early 70s, short and sturdy, with warm brown skin, silver curls, and the kind of eyes that noticed everything. I had waved to her for years, but never really known her. When I opened the door, she held a small container of chicken casserole. "Margaret," she said softly, "I heard the shouting last night. I didn't want to pry, but I wanted to make sure you were safe." I invited her in, and somehow the whole story poured out of me. The wedding, the rent, the bank, the lawyer, the red circles on my husband's will. Linda listened like a nurse listens, patiently, without shock, without interrupting the wound before it finished bleeding. When I was done, she set her hand over mine. "Honey, I spent 38 years caring for elderly patients. You would not believe how many sons and daughters suddenly become concerned when money stops flowing." Linda told me to start a notebook immediately. Write down every call, every text, every visit, every threat, every dollar you ever sent. Dates matter. Screenshots matter. Receipts matter. People like this count on your shame keeping you quiet. Then, as if she had decided I needed something warmer than legal advice, she walked into my kitchen and opened my pantry. "Do you still bake?" she asked. I almost laughed. "I used to make Georgia peach cobbler every Sunday." Linda smiled. "Then today, you're making one." That afternoon, flour dusted my counters for the first time in years. The smell of peaches, cinnamon, and butter filled the kitchen, and for a while, Ethan's emergencies felt far away. Linda drove me later to the community meeting Mrs. Harper had mentioned. There I met Samuel Brooks, a retired history teacher in his 70s, tall and lean, with kind gray eyes and a careful Southern voice. His nephew had drained thousands from him before Samuel finally said no. After the meeting, he asked if I wanted coffee sometime. For the first time in a long while, I said yes to something that was only for me. 3 days after the community meeting, I was in my kitchen peeling peaches for another cobbler when the doorbell rang. The new camera showed a woman in a gray blazer standing on my porch with a leather folder tucked under one arm. She looked professional, calm, and far too serious for a friendly visit. When I opened the door, she gave me a polite smile. "Mrs. Margaret Collins? My name is Denise Mallory. I'm a social worker with Georgia Adult Protective Services." Denise was in her mid-40s, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp, observant eyes that missed nothing. "We received a report expressing concern for your safety and mental capacity." For 1 second, the smell of warm peaches turned sour in my stomach. I knew exactly who had made that report. Denise explained that my family claimed I had become paranoid, isolated, financially reckless, and influenced by new neighbors and strangers. They said I had installed cameras because of delusions, cut off contact without reason, and refused loving help from my son. Hearing their lies, spoken in an official voice, made my hands go cold. Still, I remembered Linda's advice. People like this count on your shame keeping you quiet. So I stood straighter and said, "Before I answer anything, I would like my attorney present." My attorney, Rebecca Sloan, arrived 30 minutes later in a navy suit and low heels, carrying herself like a woman who had walked into many rooms where bullies expected to win. Rebecca was in her early 50s, with short auburn hair, intelligent green eyes, and a voice so steady it made panic feel unnecessary. She specialized in elder financial abuse, and Linda had helped me find her the morning after the break-in. Rebecca shook Denise's hand, then opened her briefcase on my dining table. "Mrs. Collins is happy to cooperate," she said, "but the full context matters." Rebecca laid out the evidence piece by piece. First came my bank statements, showing more than $48,000 sent to Ethan and Brianna over 4 years. Then the text messages, Brianna asking for rent, Ethan accusing me of being childish, both of them pressuring me after the payments stopped. Next came still images from the new security system and a written account of the night they entered my home with Calvin Price. Rebecca also showed Denise the shredded remains of the power of attorney papers and the copy of my husband's will marked with Brianna's red circles. Denise's expression changed slowly from suspicion to discomfort. Then Rebecca called Samuel Brooks on speakerphone. Samuel answered from the community library, where I had been helping him organize a small fundraiser for new children's history books. Calmly, he explained who he was, a retired teacher, a longtime volunteer, and someone who had spent several hours with me planning donation lists, seating charts, and announcements. "Mrs. Collins is not confused," he said. "She is organized, sharp, and more capable than half the committee. Last night, she corrected my math on the budget." For the first time that morning, I nearly laughed. Denise closed her folder after nearly an hour. Her face had softened. "Mrs. Collins," she said, "based on what I've seen today, I do not believe you are an endangered adult due to incapacity. I believe there may be financial exploitation and coercion from family members." She promised to note that in her report and advised me to continue working with Rebecca. When she left, I sat down because my knees suddenly felt weak. Rebecca touched my shoulder and said, "This was not the end, Margaret. But today, they made a mistake. They put their greed on paper." 2 weeks after the false report failed, Ethan and Brianna filed their petition in county court. Rebecca called me into her office on a rainy Monday morning and placed the papers in front of me. The words looked cold and official. Petition for emergency guardianship due to mental incapacity. My own son was asking a judge to take away my right to manage my house, my savings, and my life. For a moment, I could not breathe. Rebecca, calm as ever, tapped the document with one finger. "They think this will scare you into surrendering," she said. "Instead, we're going to let them talk." The hearing took place in a small courtroom downtown, with dark wooden benches and tall windows that made everything feel older and heavier. Ethan sat across the aisle in a new gray suit, his jaw tight. Brianna wore a soft blue dress and carried tissues like she had rehearsed grief in the mirror. Their attorney painted me as a confused widow who had suddenly become paranoid, cut off her loving family, and fallen under the influence of outsiders. Every time he said that word, Brianna lowered her eyes as if she were heartbroken. I sat still and let them build their little stage. Then Rebecca stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. First, she submitted 4 years of bank records, showing more than $48,000 I had paid for Ethan and Brianna's rent, car bills, insurance, groceries, credit cards, repairs, and wedding expenses. Then she showed printed screenshots from Caroline Whitaker's wedding album. Brianna's parents, smiling beside the bride and groom, champagne glasses raised, dozens of guests laughing under Charleston lights. Mrs. Collins was not invited, Rebecca said. Yet she had helped pay for the dress. The courtroom went very quiet. Brianna was called first. She spoke in a trembling voice about how much she loved me, how worried she had been, how painful it was to see me turn against family. Rebecca waited until Brianna finished crying before approaching with one sheet of paper. Mrs. Collins testified that you told her you only invited real family to the wedding. Did you say that? Brianna's face hardened for half a second. It was taken out of context. Rebecca nodded. Please explain the context in which telling a mother she is not real family becomes loving concern. Brianna opened her mouth, but nothing useful came out. When Ethan took the stand, my chest ached so badly I had to grip the edge of my chair. He looked smaller up there than I remembered. Rebecca asked him about the power of attorney, the night he entered my home, and the old will spread across my dining table. Then she played the security footage. The screen showed Ethan, Brianna, and Calvin Price inside my house, moving through my private papers before I had ever invited them in. Brianna's red marks on the will appeared next. Even the judge leaned forward. Then came the question that broke him. Rebecca stood a few feet from Ethan and asked, "Mr. Collins, when was the last time you visited your mother without asking for money, discussing money, or expecting financial help?" Ethan blinked. "I don't remember the exact date." Rebecca did not move. "Was it this year?" Silence. "Last year?" His attorney objected, but the damage was already done. Ethan looked down at his hands, and for the first time, the courtroom saw what I had finally seen. Concern had never brought him to my door. Need had. Linda May testified next, steady and sharp, explaining that I had been frightened, not irrational, after my family entered my home without permission. Mrs. Harper from Savannah First Trust testified that I clearly understood every financial decision I made when canceling the transfers and securing my accounts. Samuel Brooks testified that I was helping organize a library fundraiser, managing lists, budgets, and schedules with complete clarity. One by one, they did not describe a woman losing her mind. They described a woman getting it back. By the time Rebecca rested our case, the trap had closed without anyone shouting. Ethan and Brianna had come to court hoping to prove I was incompetent. Instead, every document, every witness, every photo, and every silence proved something else entirely. I had not lost my judgment. I had finally used it. When Judge Harlan adjusted his glasses and looked over the courtroom, I held my breath without meaning to. Ethan sat across from me, pale and stiff. Brianna stared at the table, her perfect performance finally cracked around the edges. For weeks, they had tried to turn my independence into illness, my boundaries into cruelty, and my silence into weakness. The judge's voice was calm, but every word landed like a hammer. This court finds no credible evidence that Mrs. Margaret Collins lacks mental capacity. On the contrary, the evidence shows that she understands her finances, her property, and the consequences of her decisions. The petition for guardianship is denied. My knees nearly gave out. Then he continued. Furthermore, the The court is deeply concerned by the conduct of the petitioners, entering Mrs. Collins's home without permission, examining private documents, pressuring her to sign financial authority, and pursuing control over her assets after financial support ended, may indicate elder financial exploitation. Until further review, Mr. Ethan Collins and Mrs. Brianna Collins are ordered to have no direct contact with Mrs. Collins. Brianna's head snapped up. Ethan looked at me then, truly looked at me, but I no longer searched his face for the boy I had raised. That boy existed in my memories. The man before me had tried to take my freedom because I stopped paying his bills. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca Sloan squeezed my hand. "It's over, Margaret." "No," I said quietly. "Now it begins." What Ethan and Brianna did not know was that before the hearing, I had already changed my will. My house would no longer pass to people who circled it in red ink like vultures. 3 weeks later, I sold it. Part of the money established the Robert Collins Second Chance Scholarship, named after my late husband, for older women who wanted to rebuild their lives. The rest became something I had dreamed about since I was a young bride, a little bakery on a sunny Savannah corner. I called it Maggie's Second Chance Bakery. 6 months later, the smell of peach cobbler, cinnamon rolls, and fresh biscuits drifted out onto the sidewalk every morning. Linda May helped on weekends, bossing customers into trying the pecan pie. Mrs. Harper came in before work for black coffee and a blueberry scone. Samuel Brooks became my closest companion, sitting by the window with his history books, smiling every time I caught him watching me knead dough. The first scholarship went to Gloria Bennett, a 62-year-old widow with tired hands and brave eyes. She wanted to learn baking after spending years caring for a husband who had left her with debts. When I handed her the certificate, she hugged me and cried into my shoulder. "You made me feel like I still have a chance," she whispered. That was when I understood. The money I had once poured into selfish hands had finally become something holy. As for Ethan and Brianna, word traveled through Savannah the way it always does. They left their luxury apartment, sold the SUV, and Brianna got her first full-time job in years. I did not celebrate their suffering, but I did not rescue them from it either. One evening, just before closing, Ethan appeared outside the bakery. He looked thinner, older, ashamed. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry." I studied his face. Then I placed a warm loaf of bread in a paper bag and handed it to him. "I forgive you, Ethan," I said, "but forgiveness is not a bank account." He lowered his eyes. For once, he did not ask for more. After he left, I locked the door and stood beneath the golden sign of my bakery. Savannah glowed softly around me. I was no longer a mother trying to buy love with rent checks and grocery money. I was Margaret Collins, and I had finally learned that real love never comes with an invoice, and real family never makes you pay to belong. Sometimes God does not remove people from our lives to punish us. Sometimes He reveals their hearts so we can finally stop destroying ourselves for people who only love what we provide. For years, I thought being a good mother meant giving until nothing was left of me. But I learned that love without respect is not love at all. And forgiveness does not mean handing someone the keys to hurt you again. So let me ask you this. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven Ethan? Or would you have closed that door forever? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to know what you think. And if this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional stories like this one.